Hey guys, this is Nick here with What Game Now with a part 5 in our video series. This is about tech. I'm going to apologize in advance. I didn't get a chance to put pictures in this because I quite simply ran out of pictures. I noticed I was reusing some, so I apologize. There's not as much to look at here. All right, so what the heck is tech? So tech is a game element that is brought in to counter or react to very specific things that you expect within the game. So usually these elements are considered subpar, interestingly enough, but it's because they tend to have highly specialized roles. This unit is designed to do one very specific thing. And oftentimes that's related to opposing units, maybe terrain conditions, and the issue with them, and what makes them quote unquote subpar, is that you can't guarantee that you're going to fight those. If I have a unit that is specifically designed to fight one other unit in the game, what are the odds I'm going to face that unit? If it's a reasonably common unit, okay, maybe not too bad. But if it's a super rare unit, now all of a sudden that unit's ability is a little blah. Now we have a problem. And that's where this tech idea comes in here. Tech is those silver bullets. Silver bullet, if you're not aware, I believe it's a reference to werewolves. If in the werewolf mythology, they are basically silver bullets kill them, but are almost completely useless against anything else. So, how do we find potential tech pieces? If I look at something, how do I know if it might be tech? Well, they're usually going to have specific rules or weapon loadouts, and those are going to cause them to be disproportionately effective against certain things, enemies, terrain, or things like that. Now, if you think about this for a second, an anti-tank unit qualifies as this. If I have a unit that's queued in specifically for anti-tank work, it meets that definition. What separates that anti-tank from a traditional tech piece? Well, if I have anti-tank units in a game, that means tanks exist. And what are the odds I'm going to face tanks? If you're playing, say, Warhammer, you're probably going to see tanks or vehicles. If you play, say, bolt action, not always guaranteed to see vehicles. That's an example where even the same role can all of a sudden be found as just a role in one game, but it's tech in another one. Okay. The problem with tech pieces in general is that they're bad fits for generic all-comers army builds. They involve you making decisions tuned to a specific opponent or group of opponents. And if you're going for a generic all-comers, you are by definition saying, I don't expect to face that, or I expect to face other things. And a lot of times these tech units just aren't good enough in those other roles. So to summarize here, identifying our potential tech, we're looking for combinations of rules or weapon loadouts that make them disproportionately effective against certain things or in certain conditions. And an example here actually is an anti-tank element. The difference here is how often do you expect to face tanks. If you're playing a game where tanks are absurdly rare, an anti-tank element actually is a tech piece. If tanks or things that operate similar to tanks are very common, a la say Warhammer, they're not tech pieces anymore. Now you put them in there, you're going to expect to get their value out of them. So now we know what tech is. How do we know when we need it? Well, unfortunately, this is where we get into a little controversial. So the way that you decide if you need tech is you consider your expected opposition. What do I expect to face? If you're going to a tournament, you will want to look and see, well, what do I expect people to play? If it's a one-off game, what do I expect my opponent to play? And look at that and say, are there certain things you expect to see? More often than not, overwhelmingly more often than not. In fact, just not seeing them would be rare. Tech pieces against them are going to be very helpful. I'm going to go out of miniature gaming here for a moment. I'm going to go into TCGs. For those of you who are not aware, Dave and I and a couple others are getting into the new Digimon TCG. And what there was a tournament at the end of during December where they actually had a webcam tournament, which is pretty cool. Now, when I was preparing for this tournament, I'm looking at the field and looking at the various decks that are fairly common and asking myself, what do I expect to see? This is the first tournament of the game, so a lot of people are going to probably not want to play something too complicated. And technically, the game wasn't actually out yet at the time. I don't know if it's out by the time this video comes out, but it wasn't out at the time of this tournament. The way you got cards was there was a pre-release event, so there was a super limited supply of cards. So I figured a lot of people were going to take simple to use, essentially quote unquote budget decks. And I put cards in my deck that were specifically designed to fight against those. And they generally paid off. That's tech. That's looking at a situation and saying, I need a tech piece. Now, that's a competitive discussion. In a casual discussion, you need to be very careful. Very, very, very careful. Because if you tech against your opponent, it can be viewed as unsportsmanlike. For example, a good friend of mine used to play old Warhammer Fantasy. He played dwarves. Those of you who are not familiar with old Warhammer Fantasy dwarves, their entire shtick of things was they're anti-magic. They don't use magic, and they're really good at shutting down your magic. Tech against that army would be not bringing a wizard. We'll get to how that's tech in a moment, but that's an example of tech, where I'm fighting dwarves. I know he's going to shut down all my magic, so I'm not going to bring magic. I know he's going to have a bunch of artillery, so I'm going to bring some high-speed units to go clean out his artillery. Now, my opponent was cool with that. We constantly do that back and forth to each other. It doesn't bother us. But against somebody, that could really be taken the wrong way. I know I've had people do that to me without my knowledge. And it strikes me as, yeah, good job, jackass. Excuse the language. A good example was I was playing high elves. My opponent was going to play ogres, and he knew down to the model what my collection of high elves was. I only had a vague knowledge of what he had, and he built an army that was specifically designed to fight mine. Okay, now I'm not too offended by that, but at the same time, you know, he didn't bring a unit because he thought, oh, he's playing elves, he's going to bring this bolt thrower, so I'm not going to bring my Mornfang heavy cavalry, which is the correct decision. But it's one of those things that, like, not being aware of it could very easily be taken the wrong way. And then lastly, with tech, I do want to mention is too much tech is a thing. Because these tech units tend to not be very good at other roles, don't overdo it. Tech is, when we get to the next video, we're going to talk about putting all this together. Tech is the last thing that goes into an army. All right, I'm going to talk about two subsections of tech before we go, and those are skews and what I call anti-tech. Both are based off the idea of tech. It's the expected ability to combat certain common gameplay pieces. You know, I'm expecting this out of my opponent. What do we do? Well, a skew list says, you know, hey, what if I just took more than you could deal with? You know, most armies are going to have 1 or 2 anti-tank units. What if I had 7 tanks? You can't possibly kill all of them by the time they kill your anti-tank. And then I just run the field with the tank stuff. So that's referred to as a skew. It's basically taking one gameplay element to 11. Basically saying you can counter this, but you can't counter it enough. It's called a skew. And then the last thing is what I call anti-tech, which if you go back to that dwarves versus chaos discussion I just mentioned, not taking the wizard is what I call anti-tech. Not bringing something because somebody expects it is actually a form of tech in and of itself. Looking at the table and saying, you know, my opponent is expecting me to bring X, Y, and Z. What if I just didn't? And that's a very interesting form of tech, because what happens is your opponent is going to take things, or realistically is going to be taking things based off of that assumption. Even if they're not deliberately designing their army to fight yours, if you go build a 40k army, you're going to have anti-tank units. If you're going to play heavy gear, you're going to have electronic warfare elements. You just are. Not bringing the things that those things want to fight doesn't require you to look at your opponent's collection and say, "Oh, yes, I know exactly what they have, so I'm not going to do that." It's just expected of any player in the game that you're going to bring that. And if you don't, that's actually a form of tech in and of itself. I call it anti-tech. Anyway, guys, it's been a little rambly. I apologize. I also apologize for the lack of pictures. This has been Nick here with What Game Now, signing off.
Hey, this is Dave. If you like what we're doing here at What Game Now, go ahead and click on one of the videos which should be on either side of me, or click right in the middle and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell once you subscribe so that you know when we have new videos. Please go ahead and share us with your friends. Let everybody know that we're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all of our subscribers already. And we look forward to bringing you more content every chance that we get.